Hi everyone, here's the book chemist once again. Today I'm reviewing Victim by Boryga, a book that puts its finger somewhat uncomfortably on identity politics and on our thirst for social and racial justice. How much of the collective indignation that we've all experienced in recent years before stories of systematic oppression, police violence, social injustice, how much of that was genuinely heartfelt and how much of it was fabricated, was something fabricated by the media to sell us our own indignation, our own rage, and ultimately sell our attention to advertisers. The book focuses on Javi, a kid from the Bronx, a kid of Latino origin, who goes through a rather turbulent childhood, has dreams of literary greatness, of making it as a writer one day, although mostly as a means of making a lot of money, or so it seems at least, and who at one point realizes that if he plays his card right, he can turn himself into a bit of a poster boy for racial uplifting. And as a spokesperson for somebody who made it out of systematic oppression and managed to get into a place of privilege and can now use his privilege to talk about these issues. Even if the price for all of that is that he has to bend the truth more than a little about the reality of his experiences and the experiences of the people he loves. The story of how he is persuaded into bending the truth in this way is plotted out very convincingly and really shows you how a person, a normal person really, might be persuaded in the right circumstances to pull the kind of swindle that Javi ends up pulling in the course of the novel, gradually, a little step at a time. It reminded me very much of How I Won a Nobel Prize by Julius Taranto, another novel that deals with a inflammatory contemporary issue, in this case cancel culture and the backlash against this supposed cancel culture, deals with these themes. They're both books that deal with these topics in ways that are inevitably controversial, inevitably a little provocative, but still very stimulating, because ultimately in an ideal world where we're all intelligent readers, can all approach these topics soberly, that should be a key function of art, and especially of fiction, exploring difficult, problematic, contradictory, complex issues in a way that shows you the various perspectives that people can have on these issues, depending on their background, their experiences, their ideas, their makeup. Some of the complexity in Victim, for instance, comes from the fact that the way Javi talks about his childhood in the Bronx in the course of the book is really very different from the way, for instance, his mom or his friends would have described this life. He talks about it as if he had a difficult, violent, dangerous upbringing, but that's not really the way his mom sees it. She claims that, they had a roof over their head, food on their plate, access to entertainment. Really, they had a life of relative plenty, if you will. And definitely she wouldn't identify as a victim, be it of the system of oppression or anything else, but as somebody who fought for what she had and is by no means part of the downtrodden. Similarly, when he talks about the prison system as being inherently unjust and oppressive, he is not necessarily wrong, but to make his point, he has to bend the truth a little about the experience of a friend of his who actually went to prison and actually saw it as a place where he could grow, a place where he had good teachers, he met interesting people, etc. Ultimately, Victim is a testament to the hypocrisy of many of our modern crusades, not because their ideals are necessarily flawed or wrong, but because when you assume these types of puritanical views on these complex matters, inevitably you're going to distance yourself from the real life lived experience of the people who dealt with these difficult situations. And that's easier than ever these days, where social media is engineered to make us entrenched in our political views, feed us the ideals we already have, and pitch us against one another. I'm reminded of a reflection I read recently in Perfection by Vincenzo Latronico, a great short novel about millennial life, where the characters reflect on the fact that some of the ideals they have and that seem unbendable and extreme and pure when discussed on social media end up feeling fairly innocuous when they talk about them in everyday life. Some of the fights they have on social media and that seem life or death situations, when they talk about those things with people in real life, they end up agreeing to disagreeing and moving on quite naturally, really. Overall, Victim is a fun, engrossing book. It's definitely got a strong humorous note that's quite compelling, and the story moves at a very interesting pace. I thought perhaps its main flaw was that the characters maybe feel a little flat and sometimes a little lifeless. Even Javi, sometimes I felt as if his motives were a little unexplored beyond fairly simple motives of laziness and greed, the motives for why he did all the things that he did. And definitely his mom, maybe his friend Joe, felt a little monodimensional, a little monochromatic. One of the most interesting character developments in the book was that of Anais, Javi's college girlfriend, who, upon graduating, goes very swiftly from being a uncompromising, radicalized student to a very compromising hipster living in New York, dreaming of Brooklyn. And I thought that was an interesting development, but even that one wasn't really explored in a way that was maybe as deep or as convincing as I would have wished. At the same time, I felt like some of the most interesting reflections in Victim went beyond its takes on social issues and really were just Javi discussing the disconnect and the strangeness of his life, going from a place like the Bronx to places of great privilege, such as the headquarters of stylish, glamorous magazines and publications. I found those reflections quite interesting and relatable. I'm by no means somebody from an underprivileged background. I come from a fairly humdrum, sleepy, nice city. But even when I went to later I went to private university, had a bit of the same disconnect, and definitely later on when I moved to England, where suddenly you're among people who feel comfortable leaving their laptop behind in the library or talking to strangers in the street, and which to me was crazy. I was like, are you insane? Are you trying to get murdered? And it's interesting to see the ways in which growing up in different environments really change people's makeup and mean that they grow up to be adults with very different views on the world, on basic things such as food, neighborhood life, all sorts of aspects really of everyday life. I'm not explaining it too well, but I thought the book captured that really beautifully and in a way that was quite natural and interesting. Unfortunately, I do believe that Victim probably came out at the worst possible time, because we're all aware of the current backlash against identity politics. Not that the backlash wasn't even there, but these days it feels especially vicious. So some of its reflections feel a little bit like shooting a dead horse. I think the book would have hit differently had it come out at the heyday of identity politics, maybe a few years back. That happens sometimes with books. I'm reminded of Moonglow by Michael Chabon, one of my favorite novels, definitely one of my favorite novels of his, which has this long, subtle, wistful reflection on the fact that some aspects of far-right politics and ideology, some elements of fascism, survived into American politics into the second half of the 20th century. It's a beautiful, really intelligent, really, for me, quite life-changing reflection. I really love that novel. But it came out in 2017 at a time where those fascist tendencies were very much back on the floor, were really obvious for everyone to see. So the book's subtle reflection suddenly felt a little bit like a case of, no shit Sherlock. It happens. Some books are published with bad timing. Had they come out a couple years earlier, I think they would have been seen as prophetic in a different way. What did you think of Victim? Has it been on your radar? Have you read it? Have you enjoyed it? It reminded me too, just as a final connection, of other recent novels about Latino and Latina life in New York, Dominicana, Olga Dice Dreaming. If you've enjoyed those, chances are you'll find you'll enjoy reading about Javi's experiences growing up in the Bronx and beyond. I thought it was a good book, even with the few reservations I described. I would recommend it, and I look forward to hearing what you thought if you've read it. And yeah, thanks for watching the video. It's always awesome, and bye everybody.